day, Internet. This is DTNS Live for Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. From Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
In Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Roger Chang, the show's producer.
We are also joined by Andrea Jones-Rooy, data scientist and host of Behind the Data. Welcome back, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you for the applause. How lovely. Great to be here.
There you go.
There we go.
That's the applause we were looking for.
I won't join a live stream without a guarantee of a standing ovation. So
it's in your writer.
Yeah,
I know.
Yes.
Daily Tech News Show Live's made possible by you listening right now. Big thanks to all of you, including Tim Ashman, Johnny Hernandez, High Tech Oki, and our brand new patron, C. Kilps.
Yay!
Standing ovation for C. Kilps also gets this.
You get the applause.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to DTNS Live. This is the show where we discuss the tech news to help us all understand it a little better. How's everyone doing? Andrea, how's it going in your neck of the woods?
My neck of the woods is all right. I'm in New York City, and it's not quite as freezing as it has been. And so that means I'm wearing more hats and gloves than I need to, and had the audacity of complaining when I was out today that I was hot after a month of freezing to death. So everything's fine. I'm just being difficult.
The audacity of hot.
The audacity of hot.
No, I know that feeling. It rained in LA the other day, which is
magical.
Something that we wanted very badly. And I was like, it's rain, and now I'm
And we got the right amount. Then we had a frost advisory last night. And I'm like, try hard. It sounds like you're trying too hard, nature. Just
the tornado, and
relax.
then you'll really jump the shark if that hits. How are you all doing?
We're good. We're good. I mean, Tom and Roger, we're all in the same city, but we're in different parts of the city. As I look outside my window right now, sunny skies, looking good. We got tech news to get to.
Yeah.
And without further ado, let's do that.
All right. OpenAI is what I would like to call it, launched ChatGPT Gov, specifically designed for the U.S. government to use. Building on the security features of ChatGPT Enterprise, this is a product that lets government agencies input sensitive and non-public data into OpenAI's models while keeping it secure in their own hosting environments. It's only on their systems. It doesn't go to OpenAI systems. Since the start of 2024, more than 90,000 government employees at various levels have used ChatGPT to generate more than 18 million prompts for tasks like document translation, summarization, policy memo drafting, code generation, application development. So this is a way for them to do it in a way that doesn't share that data with anybody else.
If you listened to DTNS Live yesterday, you know that DeepSeek was a big topic of conversation. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman posted on X Tuesday that recently released DeepSeek R1 is, quote, an impressive model, particularly around what they're able to deliver for the price. Altman added his company will obviously deliver much better models and pull up some releases. He also added that OpenAI's current strategy requires billions of dollars of investments into cloud resources, but is the right path forward, adding, quote, we are excited to continue to execute on our research roadmap and believe more compute is more important now than ever before to succeed at our mission. Basically saying, we spent a lot more money, but that was for the right reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what Justin was saying yesterday. If they can do that at that cost, imagine what we can do with the amount of money we have. So everybody wins. It finally happened. General Motors CEO and chair Mary Barra said Tuesday that the company expects to save up to $1 billion annually by ending the Cruise robo-taxi development program. Back in November, we told you that GM said it would no longer fund its self-driving subsidiary Cruise. GM CFO Paul Jacobson said those projected cost savings are based on the assumption that Cruise employees will be fully integrated into GM by mid-year.
Google announced plans to rename the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America in Google Maps for U.S. users, not everybody, but U.S. users, following an executive order. Mount Denali will also revert to its older name, Mount McKinley. Google said the updates align with federal naming conventions, but clarified that users in other countries will continue seeing the official local name. names.
Yeah, I see this being widely misunderstood. Google has a longstanding policy that was developed around other disagreements over map names, especially in places like Russia and Eastern Europe, that says for the country itself, we go with whatever the country calls it. For anybody outside, we'll show them both names if there's two names in use. So they're just saying we'll do the same thing here. Apple patched an actively exploited 0-day affecting iPhones, Macs, and other Apple devices. The vulnerability is described as a use after free bug in the core media component that could permit a malicious application already installed on the device to elevate privileges. Basically, use after free means that after you free the memory location, a program doesn't clear the pointer to that memory. So the attacker can then use that pointer to hack the program and put something in that memory slot. The issue has been addressed with improved memory management on devices running the latest versions of all the OSs: iOS, iPadOS, macOS, Sequoia, tvOS, visionOS, and the watchOS. Don't forget that one.
Well, passwords. Passwords are a thing we all need to use. A lot of people are like, why aren't we in a passcode life yet? Some of you are. But when it comes back to passwords and PIN numbers, Tom, what's the latest?
Yeah, PINs in particular is what's going on here with a story from Australia's ABC News. It's a really well-constructed story where they took some of the research from Have I Been Pwned API. So they used public data about what pins are being shared out on the internet that have been hacked and exfiltrated and all of that, and then broke it down into a nice little chart so you can see which ones are used more frequently. Big hat tip to Julian Fell for the reporting on this story and Teresa Tan for the design. You might guess that 1234 is the winner, and you'd be right. 0000 is also in there. It is right there behind 1234. The successors like 1111, 2222, also very frequent. 1212, also in the top 10. That's right there at number 5. 1342. A clever way of saying I'm not doing 1, 2, 3, 4 is the number 4 most popular. But they put this all in a graph. And the other thing that's interesting is you can see like a big line going up the top, from the bottom to the right, as people are doing, various dates like 2512 for December 25th or 2902 for February 29. You also see a box around U.S. dates that's a little fainter, but it's U.S. people doing 1225 for December 25th or 229 for February 29th. 2580 is another very popular one. That's when you just draw a line on the keyboard and just do the numbers in order like that. The point of all of this, of course, is if you pick a code that isn't in the top 50 on this list, you will be more secure than other people. These are easily hackable. But I really like the way ABC created this graphic, because you can take the first two numbers on the left axis and the last two numbers on the right axis, and then you can see how popular. They put a little brighter spot if it's popular, those various pins are.
To me, this whole thing illustrates not that people pick bad passwords, or PIN numbers, which is very true, but four digits for a PIN number seems ridiculously short.
In China, we have 6 digits. And so it always feels very luxurious now in the U.S. to only do 4 and move on with your life. I'm shaving seconds every year.
I used to have an 8 pin from my ATM card. So when I used that card at like a point of sale, like at the supermarket, I would punch in 4 digits, and then the cashier would be ready to check. It's like, hold on, I got 4 more to punch in. But now they forced me to go back down to 4, and it's like, I'm not using this anymore. I'm just going to use my credit card.
I also think, so when it comes to PIN numbers, so for example, with my my healthcare system, I have a username, I have a password, but then I also have a PIN for various things. If I have to, get stuff expedited to the pharmacy type thing, and it's a 4-digit PIN. That's all I get. And they say, like, you can't use the last 4 of your social, which is, I wouldn't have done that anyway, but it's like, all right, I don't know, what's my PIN? I mean, I already have a password. So I think in some circumstances, a lot of people are like, I'm just going to like use a PIN that I remember easily because didn't I already have a password for this whole situation that I'm in already?
10,000 possible combinations for pins, which isn't a big space. I'll give you that. But you can choose one that isn't as easily guessable as 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'd like to see. I mean, I
1, 2, 3,
assume
4 is you're not trying that hard.
Yeah, you
unless
gotta
you were
at
born
least-
in December of 1934.
I like the people that were so clever. They chose the one that was only the 4th most popular. That was my personal
1,
favorite.
3,
But
4,
I feel,
2. Yeah.
yeah. Is the ideal dream that it's a uniform distribution across both axes so that there is no most popular? Because I'm sure we would never get there. What I'm getting at is I would love to see if this study really takes off and everyone takes it seriously, do the same study in 5 years and see where we all migrated. I bet we'll all migrate to like 5555 and the even number or something, maybe prime numbers will trend or something like that.
Oh.
Yeah, if everybody's like, well, I'm not going to use any of these 50, but then everybody ends up using a similar
the same second
similar
50.
number. Yeah.
But then there's going to be a attacker who's like, ooh, prime number people. I'm getting you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? If you know the commonality of this, because it's not like the Australian broadcasting company is the only ones who can pull this number, you can brute force attack things starting with this list, and you'll do it faster than having to move through all 10,000. Although 10,000 doesn't take that long to brute force attack these days, but still.
It's four digits. You would think, honestly, I mean, this is my thing. It's actually easier for me to remember a longer string of numbers than just 4 digits.
Now
Well, that's why
Roger's just
people
showing
say you
off.
should do like horse battery staple, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
like I remember entire phone numbers plus area code, right? I have like 6 in my head. I know addresses, but if you ask me 4, then I'm gonna have to look like, where did I put it? What did I remember? Because it's so
there's
easily
like a
forgettable.
muscle memory thing going on.
I mean, I feel like the ideal would be you can pick one that's as long as you want, and maybe the minimum is 4 or 5 or something like that. But like, you could do 60. Like, wouldn't that just make it infinitely more secure if we could all just pick
Infinite
Absolutely.
digits would make it difficult. for
infinite
people to
digit?
brute
Yeah,
force.
yeah. I will be
I
saying
think-
my PIN for the rest of my life.
And honestly, 4-digit pins are on their way out. There's not that many places where you have to, where you're limited to 4 digits. I think the story is showing that, if you are stuck using a PIN code on an ATM or something and it's only 4 digits, you don't be at the front of the line. Don't be the first code that somebody tries if they have, you want to put as many impediments in place as possible, even if you're stuck in a small address space like this. But yeah, the idea that we should have longer passcodes, of course, is important, but a lot of times people are like, well, but this is my backup if my Face ID doesn't work. I don't want it to be super long. So,
Plus, the websites have the 4 boxes already. It would be confusing if you needed to add a fifth.
yeah,
I have
that
2
too.
more boxes. Ridiculous.
No one has time for that. Yeah.
Chaos.
No,
Back in the early
drag on
iOS
productivity.
days, you had 4 digits. I remember what mine was. Nobody needs to know what it was. But
Should we
then
guess?
it was like,
We each take a turn.
was it 1122?
It wasn't. No.
2,
You're
1,
never
2,
gonna
1.
guess. No. You guys are so off. But then it became 6 digits. So I was like, okay, do that. And then it became custom. So now, it's a whole thing, which is like slightly annoying to me because I'm like, remember the days where I just had the 4? When I infrequently have to, type this number in. But the more secure, the better.
I think the diagonal line is years, and it was interesting to note that unless someone born in 1342 is putting that in for that reason, 1986 is the most popular year PIN code at number 9, right in front of 2020, and then 1989. So
it's Taylor Swift people.
Yep, I was just
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
that.
89 is definitely
You
Taylor
beat me
Swift
to it.
people,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I guarantee that. But why 86
I don't know.
I
at
wonder
number
if it's
9?
you're the right age, like generationally, you're an age that uses the most PIN codes. Like
Right.
I'm a little
Yeah.
bit older
And
than
you're
that,
just
and
like,
maybe
I just
I'm
want to
pre
remember.
that.
There's just there's a the top of the bell curve is people born in
I mean,
1986.
listen,
maybe.
if your PIN code is 1996, you should not be born in 1986.
Well, there's also a selection bias here of these are the PIN codes that got hacked, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
So maybe
what is the
more
most popular
companies
unhacked?
that have people born in 1986 as customers
That's
are
right.
more hackable. Yeah.
The other thought is a lot of people use codes that are like their children's age, birthdays or years. So it
yeah.
could be parents
Could be
of
that.
1986.
Right. Yeah.
Could be
Yeah.
that too. Yeah.
I mean, that all comes down to like also easily accessible information, like what's your mother's maiden name when you're
Right.
trying to remember the password that you forgot
Mm-hmm.
before. where
That's
it's
always
like,
a fun one.
It's
because
like
my mother's-
I don't think I should give you that information because somebody else is gonna then know about it.
Yeah.
my mother's maiden
mother's
name is
maiden
the
name has
first one.
numbers in it.
Really? Yeah.
Cool. Wow.
Wait, is that real?
Pretty cool.
No, but when I have to put in mother's maiden name, I definitely put in something with numbers in it.
Yeah, it's never my own. All right, we're moving on to X now, which is continuing its mission to become an everything app. This is something that X has been at least talking about and potentially working toward for a while. So Roger, what's the latest?
So Tuesday, today, ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino announced in a post that the company has partnered with Visa on a new digital feature for its digital wallet set to launch later this year. X users will be able to move funds between their traditional bank accounts and their digital wallet or make instant peer-to-peer fund transfers. Say like I owe Tom $50 and I can just send it to him because we're both X users. But the users need to be X Money account users, and Visa noted that the fund transferring service will be powered by their Visa Direct service, and for users in the U.S. So currently U.S. Users, but I mean this is the thing. This actually seems kind of appealing, but 6 years too late. Like if this was if this came out
This is
earlier,
like a Zelle or a Venmo
Yes.
or
Yes.
a Cash App
PayPal.
type grab. Yeah.
but the
It's a
problem
cash
is like
app grab.
I mean, like
Cash
right
App
now, like dealing with my kids' Girl Scouts, with the cookie season coming up, everyone uses Venmo, right? It's Venmo or Zelle, and that's how we're sending money. If this was introduced 6 years earlier,
Right.
it might have been in the running. But I think everyone has sort of built in their lives around these other services right now. So
People said
I'm
the
wondering.
same thing about Zelle when it launched, but it had banks pushing it.
Yeah.
So I think that helped. I don't have a problem with anybody coming in with a new competitor if they could do it better. This hasn't launched yet. We'll see what happens when the X Money accounts actually launch. But what I want to see is not, we have added a basic bit of functionality, Visa card support. I need to see like, what is better about this? Like what makes me go, ooh, actually, if I use that, that's easier or that's better, or I can use it more often.
I think
And
it's probably
particularly-
more just like convenient. Like if the person who's going to either ask for money or send money is like, this is just how I want to do it. Most of the time, the stuff is pretty cut and dry. I have this situation all the time. I pay my rent on Zelle. I get money from one of my podcast co-hosts on another show through Venmo every month. If we're lucky. I Cash App here and there for somebody who uses that. I think that it's all designed to just be like, this is easy. Just wherever the other person is, how do they want to either send or receive money? It works out pretty well.
Yeah. So then the question becomes, how do you get people to want to have you send them money with this? Like, how do you get the folks to jump on board? Some of it can be if you're on X and you're a creator, you can get paid through this or you can get tipped through it. I could see them doing a lot of stuff like that.
And TikTok has that, right? Or
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you could, if you got a Tesla and you got a car loan, if you could pay your car loan, like just
Through X.
constantly through X and just kind of simplify that process. What I found with most payment apps is it's basically what you were saying earlier, Sarah. What has the least amount of friction? Who uses it most, right? When I was selling electronic equipment, just clearing out my garage, a bunch of people took only Venmo, and so I just set up a Venmo account because that was the only way I would get money from selling like my 30-year-old stereo receiver. And
Yeah.
you know, and go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And it's just that simple. Even again with the Girl Scouts, everyone in that either uses Zelle or Venmo, so that's what I'm using most of the time when it comes to digital fund transfers between digital apps.
Well, I was just going to add, I'm curious about if you had to sell to anyone who's not from the U.S., because I spent many years selling comedy tickets on the streets of New York because I'm a very successful comedian. And a lot of tourists in New York are not from the U.S., and we would sell the tickets, it was cash or Venmo. And many tourists didn't have cash, and many didn't have Venmo or even know what it was. And so I didn't know that Venmo was so American-centric. It works elsewhere, or I believe, but most didn't have it. And so there was more like bank transferring and other confusions. And usually we just had to send them to an ATM. So X being, I believe, more international, I wonder if that could be something that would reduce friction and increase draw.
Yeah, that could be one way that they build up some momentum, right?
Yeah.
If they can get hold in a region that doesn't have a strong payment, you've got Paytm in India, you've got Kakao Pay in Korea, you've got WeChat in China. So maybe there's a region where they can catch on that doesn't quite have a good payment app. But again, they have to be more compelling than the existing options to get momentum behind people using it.
I mean, really, just having one of the things I did when I first traveled overseas was to find out which ATMs from which banks in the area I was visiting would take my credit card.
Yeah.
And I basically found out whether it supported Sirius and whatever, so I could use whether it's the ATM or I could use their credit card machine, whatever. Just having that level of like, I have X, digital wallet. I'm going to show up, on the shores of Japan or somewhere in Tokyo, and I can pay for my ramen meal. And I don't need.
But again, it's the same as Venmo. Venmo works everywhere. It's just not taken everywhere.
Exactly.
People
Well,
don't have
that's what I'm
accounts
saying.
everywhere. So it's not. To me, it's not. Can X do what all these other apps have done? Yeah, sure. They can have all the functionality and all the availability. It's getting users. It's getting people on board and getting that critical mass where you start saying, oh, people want me to pay them with the X account. How do they do that?
Well, and one thing I appreciate as someone who's addicted to social media and is trying very hard to curb my use, I appreciate that Venmo is not tied to my Instagram or to my TikTok or whatever. So I can go in.
Yeah.
Though when I am on social media diets, I do scroll Venmo and like, ooh, someone's dating. Like, why are they paying them? Like,
that's yes.
It's a little fun.
Yes. At this point, I'm like, who is still letting the rest of us know that you paid somebody $15.95 for what? And like with like a weird emoji where I'm like, what did you do? What was this?
they're spending a weird amount of money together all the time. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
But
The
at least
melty
it's not
face?
tied.
Huh.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right. Honestly, I don't know what's going on with the Venmo thing. I'm actually concerned that hasn't been shut off entirely. But I also try not to, when I see a friend of mine being like, oh, okay, I know it was a baby shower. Like, I get it. She obviously paid for some balloons or whatever. I try not to be like, hey, you shouldn't tell me about this thing because it's not very scary that I knew about it. But
who would have thought that Venmo would be?
You're letting a lot of people know about, spending habits, which mean habits.
I love that Laminar Rainbow just used some kind of payment funding to give us a super sticker right now while we're streaming.
I love
Yay.
it. That's fun.
Perfect context
Good
to the
stuff.
conversation.
Yes.
Good
Well
stuff.
done. Well played.
Well, folks, if you want to play with us, one place you can do it is in our Discord. You can find our Discord by linking a Patreon account. Just become a patron at patreon.com/DTNS. Connect your Discord account, and you'll be in there chatting with us. Go do it right now. Patreon.com/DTNS.
We have been talking a lot on the show recently about technical advancements in generative AI, how they operate, quality of outputs, of course, cost. That's all stuff that we've been talking about and a lot of people care about as well. Andrea, you've been looking at the data regarding effects on humans. So what's the latest that you can tell us about that?
Sure. So something that I've always been interested in is how humans and humans, when we interact with one another, how we influence each other. And there's a lot of research out there that says, if you talk to a certain type of person for a long time, you start to adopt their views. If you hang out with a certain friend group that believes a certain set of things, you start to adopt those things. So something that researchers have started thinking about, there's a new paper in Nature Human Behavior, new in science terms, it's December 2024, which is hot off the press in peer review world, is research on, well, we're all humans and we're interacting with AI, and it is iterative and back and forth in a way that, say, even Googling something isn't, or even algorithms that base themselves off of our, the recommendations based on our viewing habits. It's literally an interaction. It's very conversational. So could it be the case that this sort of interaction dynamic between humans and AI, mimics humans and we can be influenced by AI? And if so, are we more influenced when we interact with AI or less influenced? So this project that I was particularly excited about set out to understand if humans could become more biased if they interact with AI that has been trained to be biased. And before we freak out about, biased is a very charged term politically, all this means is, in a very classical cognitive psychological sense, you're systematically different from correct. So for example, I have a bias where I always think I can get somewhere faster than I can. So I am systematically late. Like, I know that there's a true value and I'm always wrong. I'm systematically off. So this particular study ran a whole bunch of experiments with a total of something like 1,400 people, where they said, okay, you're going to evaluate some faces that are either some photos of people that have been modified to be either smiling or frowning or somewhere in between, a gradient of, say, 10 faces from happy to sad. And all you need to do, humans, is say, is this one happy or is this one sad? And so if something is neutral, but like a small kind of Mona Lisa smile, you just say happy, right? If it's a little bit grimace, you're supposed to recognize that it's negative. And when humans do it on their own, they're only given these pictures really briefly. When they do it on their own, 50-50 is the actual true number. So half of the pictures that are shown to these recipients, these participants, are generally positive and half are generally negative. A little, setting aside the AI, something I thought was fun is that on average, humans thought that 53% of the photos were negative. And in particular, when we look at a face very briefly, we tend to infer that this is a systematic bias we tend to infer the person is less happy than they are. And so this is longstanding research in psychology about how we judge humans' emotions. So we did that study. Then they trained two different neural networks, one on the actual true data that was labeled based on the reality. So we tell you correctly if this photo is positive or negative, and it's been designed to be positive or negative. And that AI goes up and it ends up being like 96% accurate and the training is pretty good and so on. There's a second set of neural networks that's trained on this 53% negative, slightly biased data from humans. And if this is sounding a lot like old research on machine learning bias, so far it basically is just that. They train the model on this slightly biased data at 53% photos identified as negative. And it turns out that bias, not so surprisingly, is amplified to something like 60-some% of the machine learning algorithm results classify these faces as negative. Okay, we kind of know that that's what happens. Then where things get interesting is they say, okay, some humans get to look at more faces and they're told the AI has predicted the score of these faces. Do you agree or disagree? Do you want to change your initial answer? And humans, when they were given the AI that was accurate, humans update their own views and they become more accurate, which is like great news for AI really elevating the things humans can do. But you know where this is going. Mm-hmm. It turns out if you give the biased AI to humans, already the AI has amplified the bias a tiny bit, and the bias is small, right? It's amplified it a tiny bit. The humans then change their original answers, which were pretty close to correct, 30% of the time to match the AI. So the humans get even less correct, so they get even more biased. Not great. And then what's really striking, to me at least, is that then you take the AI away and, way later sit these same humans back down and say, okay, now look at these new set of faces. The humans who were interacting previously, like ways in the past, previously with the biased AI, continue to have an amplified bias. So what that means in real life, if this is something that can be extrapolated to real life, of course, it's a very controlled experiment with a very specific style. But insofar as we want to extrapolate, that means that if I have an interaction with ChatGPT, I'm already using my own confirmation bias when it comes to identifying things like misinformation or like picking the best product or whatever. ChatGPT is going to amplify that back to me probably. And then I'm going to learn further from that, and I may leave and live in the rest of the world even more biased. So I've learned, this interaction has taught me to be a more biased person. And again, this bias could be towards a brand or a product. It could be towards a best strategy for increasing sales. It doesn't have to be the bias in the kind of political, social sense we always think of it. The last little piece that I really stood out to me is there's a graph in the paper that is my favorite. It's this one here. If you're looking at the screen, graph F, where you can see the increase in bias as humans interact either with AI. So when humans interact with AI, the bias is strongest. Some of these humans interacted with other humans. They just said, hey, you guessed that this face was negative. Other humans said it was positive. Do you want to change your view? When we interact with other humans, in this study, we were not that persuaded. So you don't see a lot of bias. But you see an equal and middle amount of bias if humans interact with AI, but they're told that the AI is human, or if they interact with humans and it's slightly higher if they're told that it's AI. So even if it's almost the same information, just being told our information is from AI makes us more likely to believe it and therefore more biased. And so one of the things I'm constantly talking about with consulting clients and speaking and teaching and all of that is we all know that machine learning output is biased. We know that AI is biased, yet we do still seem to defer to it over us. And a lot of the time it's right, but as we can see, a lot of the time it's not right. And we then take that incorrect learning out into the world and live with it. So my question for you all is, do you have ideas for things that we can do to minimize this bias? As we saw, when it is accurate, AI can be a fantastic tool for helping us solve problems and get to answers quickly. But if it's not correct, and there's a lot of times where it's hard to check, how can we know when we're dealing with AI that's hallucinating? How can we minimize this sort of thing? It stresses me out to think about, if I'm honest.
I mean, it's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of the discussion we had about the use of AI in schoolwork last week, and the use of, we kind of drew parallels between that and using a calculator in a mathematics class.
Right.
And one of the things that, I realized that when I was using a calculator, like I was in trig or something, because I had already a pretty strong foundation of understanding what numbers are divisible into another and what the output should look like. If the output looked a little wonky, I would say, hey, maybe I probably punched in the numbers incorrectly. Let me reevaluate what I did. Or I might have, in some cases, this happened in real life. I had the calculator set on a different mode rather than just straight, like it would be an exponential or scientific, where it gives a slightly different answer. And I'm wondering, maybe if people were a little more familiar with the subject matter that they were asking AI about, instead of just coming in cold, like, what is broccoli good for me? And you just type that in. It's good for most people. It's actually not good for me because I have gout. And broccoli is one of the inflammatory foods I'm supposed to minimize my intake of, or I go for the rest of my life.
But that's a really good example, because for the most part, it's like cruciferous stuff. Yeah. The more the merrier, right?
Yeah, and
but
that's what I
thought. Not for everyone.
And I used to munch on that stuff all the time until my doctor said, not so good for you because you got it.
Was your doctor a human or an AI?
Right.
He was an older gentleman. Yes, he was a human. From my perspective, he seemed like a human.
He had
the appendages and the head.
He was a gentleman.
Yes.
Right.
And he also had the stethoscope, which is the sign of a true doctor.
That's how you know it's a doctor. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that, and Roger, your example kind of reminds me of, if you're doing research and you get results that are sort of funny, you say, well, something's wrong with my code. Let me go back and mess with it and see if it's wrong. But if you get results that look pretty interesting, you don't assume, well, was there a problem with my code? And that's why I got a really interesting result. I mean, maybe, hopefully, eventually, but not always. But it is the case that you do, when you know something about the subject, it can help. And one of the things I would assure I hope that I'm right, my data science students, when they all learned how to code, and then ChatGPT came out in the middle of the semester and they said, well, I guess I don't need to know how to code. And it's like, well, the way that we're going to learn how to code is going to be different, because this is a fantastic tool for coding more quickly. And I've long maintained you don't need to memorize code, because you can find it on, Stack Overflow, but now it's all here. But you do need to understand it. Just like using Google Translate. If I'm translating everything I write into French, I don't speak a word of French. I don't have any way of evaluating if it's any good. Most of the time it will be, but sometimes I might be publicizing some really weird stuff. So it would be helpful if I had a working knowledge of French to sort of work backwards and say, well, this doesn't seem like it's at all the right word.
It's interesting you say that. If you're fluent in 2 languages and you see captions for in a movie from a different language, what I notice is oftentimes, and this is very smart, they don't do a direct translation. They do a translation of the meaning, which actually makes better sense, because if you translated some Mandarin directly into English, it would come out a little odd, right? Like, that's specifically what they're saying, but their meaning is this, and that's what you're trying to get across. And I find it, I don't know if the term adversarial is a good term, but like, anytime you get data, I always, whether it's from a person, a magazine, or generative AI or Wikipedia, I always take a slight skepticism. Not like I don't believe it, but I'm just going to follow up and see where else I can find that broccoli's bad for people with gout.
Right. I mean, that is kind of the same research skills, critical thinking, internet literacy skills maybe need to apply here. It just seems to me like it's such a free-for-all right now, especially the way I'm observing companies using AI internally, where they just say, well, the AI said this, so that's what we're going to do. Or like, I'm seeing companies use AI to decide people's performance evaluation scores. And they say, don't worry, we still have a human deciding it, but we put this AI-generated score in front of the human. And I just want to email them all this paper and say, look, first of all, these performance scores are coming from your performance scores that you gave last year. So all you've done is train them on your own. You've just duplicated yourself at best. So I do think we just defer to it in a way still.
Remember when people used to say, that's a computer error. Like, that's just an error of the computer. I don't know what happened. It was a computer error. That's why your paycheck's like $50 short. Can we say that? Like, the AI was it was hallucinating. I don't know why that dam is falling apart.
I think that does. I mean, if you're using that for payroll, sure, you're going to have situations like that. But I think it's getting more and more to the point where if the computer / AI got it wrong, it kind of goes back to the human to not understand that it got it wrong. That's I think where a lot of people are going to have some issues going forward is wait, so that's not correct? No, it's not correct. And if you know what's correct, then you would know that it's not correct. But if you don't, then where does that leave you?
I think the paper describes something even more subtle than that, though. It's not incorrect or correct, right? That it's not, I thought broccoli was good for me, turns out it's bad for me. It's more subtle. It's more like little things that are just slowly massaging you into thinking a certain way versus thinking solid incorrect facts. Does that make any sense? Like it can have a more insidious and somewhat undetectable effect versus like, well, I can demonstrably show you that here's the paper that shows that this is bad for you. It could just kind of slowly make you think that, you know what, maybe I think, huge tariffs are a bad idea or a good idea, and that's something that you can have multiple reasonable opinions about. It could sway you one way or the other. To me, it reminds me a lot of what we're seeing with social media.
Yes.
Go back to what you were saying, Andrea, about we already do this where if we're around humans a lot, we start to want to adopt their behavior. That's happening to us on social media all the time. 100%. We're starting to pick up the behavior of the people we follow on social media, whether we want it or not, and the beliefs. And so this is just another way for that to happen.
I mean, it's sort of the YouTube algorithm rabbit hole where it kind of, I'm going to watch a video that's a little bit critical of this policy. And then the next thing you know, you've been recommended something that wants to end economic policy, whatever, right?
Yeah, right.
And to me, it feels like that on steroids, perhaps. And I think we're coupled with this additional challenge that many of us know to be at least skeptical of things that show up on social media. Not all of us, and it varies by platform and it varies by what you're saying. But I feel like it's generally part of the conversation that what's on social media is not capital T truth, whereas we take what shows up in our Google, which also is catering to our previous search results. So that's not great. It's that accelerated and amplified. And Tom, you're exactly right that it's because it's so subtle, it's not like you're just going to say broccoli, always bad to everybody. It's just a tiny you might actually rethink, some of this. And it's not like it's trying to persuade you. It's just going to amplify back your own biases. And you're going to it's sort of like having your own yes man in your pocket is kind of how I think about it.
Eddie, how many times have you had someone tell you everybody knows X and you react with like, I've never heard that before. Right. Yeah. It's that kind of thing. That's an example of, oh, you're being influenced by a group that thinks things to the point that you just think it's obvious and you're not even critical of it anymore.
Yes. Or I remember going to my parents after watching the DNC over the summer and saying, were you stressed about who the surprise guest was going to be? And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, all of Instagram and X freaked out that there was going to be a surprise guest like Beyonce or Taylor Swift. And so the whole time, that's all I watched for. And my parents were, I mean, it's a silly example, but it's, you forget that you're in a little
it's illustrative
corner.
Of, not everyone, is consuming social media the same way.
Right.
And, I will add at some point, it depends on your emotional state, like how you, your psychological condition when you approach it, right? When you're content, you're not worried about things and you're not searching for things you're worried about. Like, is this my gout going to affect me for the rest of my life or something? You're not paranoid about it. You can take a little more circumspect view of the answer rather than, hey, how do I get rid of this right now because I need to be able to walk, like where you're not rage searching, but you're emotionally charged because you need to find an answer because that's the only thing that will solve your predicament.
We have so many gout cures in our chat right now.
I trust me, I've tried them all, and really what I've learned is it's a condition that can be managed. But, that's all you can do. And but it hurts.
You're right, Roger, and I'm sorry that it hurts. You're right that, the more amped up we are about the topic, whether it's our own personal safety or health in the moment, it's also true politically. Misinformation is we're most susceptible to it when we're reading about a topic that we care deeply about. And so that's when we're least critical. We're most using confirmation bias, and we're most employing disconfirmation bias, which is if someone says, actually, there are some pros to that policy, you'll say, oh, that's all nonsense. So you apply your critical reasoning selectively. And I just, AI has such possibility to really, the kind of computation is like the bicycle that humans are riding on. It can really move things forward. But if we're not thoughtful about it and or really mindful about what's going into the AI in the first place, we're riding a bike off a cliff,
Yeah.
Yeah. Another cheerful note.
Cheerful note, hopefully. Yeah. Tuesday, Spotify announced that it paid $10 billion to the music industry in 2024. So that's last year, for a total of $60 billion in payouts since Spotify launched. The International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, or IFPI, reports that there are over 500 million paying music streaming customers globally at this point, Spotify having more than half of that market, with over 252 million subscribers as of Q3 2024. Spotify said more than 60% of its current users were on its ad-supported free tier. Okay, so I thought this was interesting. First of all, I thought Spotify and Apple Music were more neck and neck. I mean, they're neck and neck in terms of what you can get, if you pay them $10 a month type thing. I'm impressed. I'm impressed by these numbers from Spotify. I also wonder of the $60 billion in payouts rather since Spotify launched. How much is that going to the indie artist who was on Spotify to begin with? Not sure about that. But a lot of people are getting paid. That's for sure.
Yeah, the Variety had a good explanation of that. And I'll quote from this article by Jem Oswald. That figure may seem questionable, the $60 billion, considering how little many musicians make from streaming. It's important to bear in mind that Spotify, like most streaming services, pays rights holders, usually a label and a music publisher, which then distribute the money to musicians and songwriters after taking their percentage. While the streaming economy leaves much to be desired in terms of compensating creators, the blame is not entirely on the streaming services. And I think that's why Spotify's putting this number out here, is like, we are making the industry more money than they've ever made before. If it's not being divided up to the creators in the same way, that isn't on us. We're shoveling the money at the rights holders, and it's up to you to deal with them, I guess.
So is this where, speaking of 1989, the Taylor Swift re-recording her masters to get away from the label, like, is that I mean, obviously
that's
most
certainly part of
musicians
this.
Can't do that, but that is a step, right? I mean, again, most
or if
musicians are
you're an
not in that
indie
position.
artist and you don't have a label, then you're going to get all the money that Spotify has. Podcasters often are in that situation. But if you're an indie artist who doesn't have a label, you don't have the promotional muscle, right? You don't have the distribution muscle. You don't have all the things that can make you popular, so you don't get as many listeners.
Right.
Well, and I think this for a lot of folks, and I know many of you in our audience will nod your heads at this. A lot of folks say, I don't like streaming. I want physical media. I want it, or physical media or media that's mine. On my hard drive. The streaming thing does not work for me. It doesn't, make me feel like I'm owning my own media, and lots of people still feel that way. However, streaming is a big part of life at this point. Some years ago, I got off the train of like having my own media. I'm like, it's fine. I'll pay, in my case, because we're talking about music, Apple Music, $10 a month. Great, and maybe an album will like disappear here and there, but for the most part, pretty great. But not for everybody. Not everybody wants to live that kind of life where they're beholden to the company that they're paying money to that can give and take media that they're paying for. So this is, I don't know. I mean, I guess Spotify kind of triumphantly announcing that a lot of people use Spotify is like, okay, Spotify, good for you, fist bump. But yeah, it kind of feels like streaming is here to stay. Well, I know it's here to stay, but for even people who are reluctant to say that they wanted to deal with streaming, it really is. I mean, if you're talking about monetary stuff, this is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, you spend $12 a month on Spotify for an individual account in the U.S. 70% of that goes to the rights holders, right? It goes to the labels and the artists and all of that. Spotify says they only keep 30% of every dollar that you spend. So if you really want to help an artist out, only stream that one song that month, right? Then all 12 of your dollars have to go towards that. It's not actually the way it works on the back end, but if you buy a CD for $10, that's it. That artist never gets another dime from you. But if you're spending $12 a month, that $12 is getting divided up, in aggregate, but theoretically in proportion to the music that gets listened to.
I was going to say maybe every month I send my favorite artist $12 via X wallet, but I think I just reinvented Patreon. I think that's what I've just done.
And I do that because ChatGPT told me to when I asked it what I should do. Yeah.
And therefore it is the only way. That is correct. I mean, the 80s are on my brain now. I'm old enough that it was a big point of someone's identity to have the big CD rack in your living room where you would display who you are and you'd page through people's books of CDs on road trips and things like that.
There was a bit of social judgment in the same way that people used to go through their private libraries, like, oh, what are you reading? Right?
I mean, it was a bookcase.
Yeah.
And still is.
People still do that with books. Yeah.
Right. But
and
no
some
one will
with
know what I'm
CDs and
listening
albums
to.
too. Yeah.
Or when I used to trade in like the big stack of CDs at Amoeba or whatever, I always feel like I'd get judged because I have a couple of Nelson CDs, not because I listened to it, but because I got it from my roommate. Because I got them from my roommate.
It's okay that you liked Nelson.
I was on the
fine.
other side of that desk at Half Price Books in the 90s when people would bring in their CDs, and I'd have to be like, we can pay you $1 for these 12 CDs. And then look at me like you're judging my musical taste. I'm like, I'm really not. That's
They
just
gave
how
me
much-
a nickel for both.
Oh, I mean, Roger, speaking of Amoeba, there was one point where I was moving apartments and I had just like boxes of CDs, like not 1, 2, 3, like 5 boxes. And I was like, you know what? We're good. You know, streaming services exist. It's time. And they were like, why? Why, Sarah? Why would you do this to us? I maybe got like $15. I remember
That's not
get
bad.
like $600
Yeah.
because I'm like, so many CDs, and they're like, we already have all these CDs though. Like, you're just
When I was in high
dumping your
school-
trash on us.
In the late 90s, I had a communications teacher who predicted, he was like, one day going to the video store and renting a video, like Blockbuster, we had a Wonder Book and Video in my hometown. He was like, that's going to go away. And people aren't going to go to the store and pick out. And I was like, this is no way. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Going to the physical Blockbuster and looking around and talking about what to get is like part of the night. And the man was right.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe not, maybe he was ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time.
But
He did predict that highways
yeah.
would be moving sidewalks, so you could just pull your car into the left lane and just kind of
So
go.
that's
train
coming,
tracks.
is what you're saying, because
Yeah,
this
so
guy is
get
usually
ready.
right. Yeah, just
Yeah,
take
he
this.
called it.
Just he
Called it was
predicted
Blockbuster, so
predicted the future of the Jetsons. I do
Next
want to
year,
give
when we get the moving sidewalk highways,
yeah.
We'll-
I do
Well,
want to
yeah.
give a shout out to Stealth Dave for have you tried selling your Nelson CD and they gave you a nickel back? Get it? They gave you a
Oh, Nelson
get it.
Nickelback. I get it. Yeah.
but Nickelback's super successful. Like they're like a huge
Oh,
band.
no, listen, I know people like to hate on Nickelback, but I feel like Nickelback was popular, and people then were like, oh, is this like butt rock? And now it's like come around again.
Yeah. I mean,
where
they
it's like
survived.
no, it's actually these are like great songs.
yeah.
So
Wait, is Tom collecting his Nickelbacks?
no, I
Probably.
don't have a Nickelback CD. I have a bunch of CDs, but whatever. They're not that interesting.
he's rummaging around in the back. Well, listen, we love whether you're a Nickelback fan or not. We love the fact that you write into us all day, every day. We really, really appreciate your feedback. Speaking of that, Mink chimed in on our discussion about YouTube hour-long ad blockers on yesterday's show, whether it makes financial sense or was more of an emotional play. Mink says, I think the missing pieces, like Justin said, ad sales are complicated. So while Tom is right that there's a hardcore group of users who will always ad block, there's a much larger group who will only ad block sometimes. For example, if the experience is different enough. My guess is that YouTube will be willing to fight a losing fight against the people who will never pay for YouTube so they can make ad blocking just bad enough so the next group of slightly less determined people won't be tempted to join.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think my argument was like, I don't think they need to go to the hour-long unskippable ad to do that. I think they're winning the fight against that more casual ad blocking people. But you're probably right. Mink's probably right that's the attitude behind it. I get that.
I mean, I can tie this to the previous conversation, which is I tend to listen to music on YouTube, and I think that's because I'm just disorganized in my life. But is that bad? Is that bad for the artists? And if you're blocking the ads, it must be.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know that
you're
it's
getting
worse.
residuals from YouTube.
Yeah. I don't know what the royalty rates are on YouTube versus Spotify, but there are royalties. They get paid for those streams. So yeah, I don't think it's on the face of it worse.
Okay. So I'm not actively destroying music.
Also, I do it too because I really like how the YouTube algorithm knows what to play next. Like
Yeah.
it does,
It's
it does a really good job.
Yeah.
Like I was surprised. Also, when I hear a song I like, I can just jump back to the video. Like, oh wait, it's this band. Blah blah blah.
Yep.
Blah.
Also, if you're not following Futurescapes, it's my new favorite channel. It's just like background sci-fi music, and it makes any.
Oh, is it like
okay.
synthwave?
I don't know enough about music to say if that's what it is, but it makes you feel like you're on a spaceship.
or some variation of synthwave.
Sounds
There's like
synth-wavy.
Simpsons wave. There's
Do you think
like,
everything is synthwave?
Synthwave
I don't
Nickelback.
think everything.
but so
everything with a
Andrea,
synth is synthwave.
Andrea, is this something that you just like put on the background when you're working?
Yes.
It's a channel, Futurescape Sci-Fi Ambience. I love this. I'm so
That's
Oh,
right.
nice.
And the,
That's fine.
and the photos are these very cool. I mean, it's all AI generated, but it's like, if Jupiter was 10 times bigger than the moon in our night sky, and so
5 hours of ambient space music. I'm
That's-
in.
it's
Nice.
literally what I listen to most.
It's like a Yule log.
You
but,
know-
yes,
yes, all year.
Sci-fi Yule log. That's exactly
Music
right.
without lyrics really helps you focus because when you
We
have
do a lot of that. Yeah, we have a
You-
bunch of channels that you just put up lo-fi beats.
Yeah,
you know?
like if you once you have lyrics in it, you start thinking, especially if it's like an 80s
For
song.
me, for sure.
No,
yeah,
I,
cannot
I immediately
avoid
get
lyrics.
pulled back
Oh,
into junior
I've had arguments with friends where they're like, "No, the lyric songs, like that's how you like your brain starts moving," and I'm like,
No way.
no, that's
No.
how I can't
No,
think."
it hijacks my brain.
Yeah.
and makes me listen to
Like
the
I'm thinking of a
lyrics,
thought,
Yeah.
and now I just can't. That it's Peter Cetera, and then it's like I'm gone.
It's like trying to work next to two people having a conversation. Like it's not happening.
Peter Cetera.
What's wrong with Peter Cetera?
What did he ever do to you, Roger?
I love Peter Cetera. He
do
did the
too.
soundtrack. Well, he didn't do the entire soundtrack for the Karate,
Karate
Kid,
Kid.
but it's the only one that anyone remembers.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to send me your favorite Peter Cetera lyric right now. Send it to feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com.
Tom, forward them all to me, please.
I will.
Forward every single one.
I promise.
Can't fight. Oh wait, that's a different band. Can't fight this feeling.
No, that's
REO.
It's hard for me to
Aria's
say I'm
feedback,
sorry
yeah.
about that, by the way.
Okay, all right. Everybody get it out now. Andrea Jones-Rooy, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for dealing with our musical puns. Let folks know where they can keep up with your latest work.
Yes, thank you. The musical puns are what I'm here for. The tech is just background noise, so this is perfect. I am. You can follow my podcast, Behind the Data, at behindthedatashow.com, and it's a project that came out as a result of the DTNS Experiment Week last summer. So thank you all for making it happen and for your support. And Roger is the producer, so it's we're slowly getting the whole gang involved.
Woo!
Yeah,
It's a good show, folks. It's probably the best show in the network.
It's a fantastic show.
Merritt.
Not better than this one right now, of course.
No, I mean,
Pre-
this is
yeah.
obviously the best one right now.
Yeah,
But otherwise, that's
obviously.
number 2.
No, it's really good. All jokes aside.
It's a protein shake of information.
thank you, Roger. I'm going to quote you on that. That's good.
Yeah.
Like, gives you muscles.
Like it really does. Like it
Builds
just
up your
like,
brain
oh,
muscles.
And accessible even if you have gout. Just so you know,
Yes,
it's not broccoli.
because I don't need to stand. I can stay
There's
seated.
no broccoli content in this
Broccoli
Yeah.
haters and broccoli lovers all
show.
welcome.
Lots of
Yeah.
cherry juice, no
I
broccoli.
mean, I do love broccoli and cheese.
I'm sorry.
All right,
it is good.
Roger.
During the show, folks have been submitting titles. If you're watching or listening live on YouTube, LinkedIn, or in Discord or on Twitch, you can go to dtns.showbot.tv and submit the titles. The top vote getter right now at the moment is from Ambassador Domo with Cruising into the Sunset. Goodbye, GM Cruise. Right behind it, though, is Zoe, The Problems with Picking Pins and Passwords. Lots of P's.
Alliteration.
I'd buy that with X dollars from Raymond PH. What else we got? All About That Bias from Saray TW. Get it? Like all about that bass.
I love it. The music puns keep coming.
Yep.
We Have Thoughts and AI Can Influence Them from Stealth Dave.
There we go.
Saray submitted The Audacity of Gout.
That's great. That's my
Could
vote.
you?
It's Roger's bio.
How could you?
Yeah.
The audacity.
The Bias Feedback Loop from Raymond PH. Sarah, what did we go with?
We went with All About That Bias from Sarah TW.
All About That Bias. All About
Nice.
Bias.
That's going to be in my
About
head.
That bias. All about
Can we
that
turn that into a song and then make it a dance and take over the world?
Yes.
Thank
we
you.
can.
so.
We'll just do a TikTok challenge.
No, Tom. TikTok is like so yesteryear. Now we
What?
we have to do something on
On Red Note.
Red Note. Yeah.
Red Note.
All right.
That's where it's cool.
Uh-oh.
Little red book.
Oh, boy. Here he goes. Here he goes.
I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
A man who
I've
simply cannot
Is that
Got
Mouse
my
book?
little red book.
Yeah.
do things. In
The fact that Americans are flocking to something called Little Red Book is just Mao
mean,
Zedong must be high-fiving us all. It's just amazing.
Well, I opened it to page 245, and it says, take the ideas of the masses and concentrate them. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Done.
Also applies to fruit concentrate.
kind of
fruit juice
sums it
concentrate.
up right there.
Yeah.
R2D2.
Have you considered making that the new DTNS tagline?
Yes. We'll have a new Mao quote every episode.
Listeners can vote on a title and a Mao quote going forward.
Big thanks to everybody watching us on LinkedIn, on YouTube. Laminar Rainbow gave us that super sticker earlier. Thank you for that, man. Appreciate that. Lots of folks watching us on Twitch as well. We got bits from Zoe Brings Bacon and Technomensch. Big Red Bro subscribed 18 hours ago. Welcome. Good to have everybody supporting us in all the places, including Patreon. Our patrons are the best. Patreon.com/DTNS.
You can watch us live. We do it live Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2100 UTC. You can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live. Thanks to everybody who hangs out with us live or after the fact. We're back again doing it all tomorrow with Scott Johnson talking about Xbox's Phil Spencer comment about the end of hardline exclusives. Yes or no? Scott will have more. Talk to you then.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.